Great. Welcome, everybody, to this talk with Chantal Traub, who's talking to us from Brooklyn, New York. And for those of you who don't know Chantal, she's a top New York City birth facilitator, doula, childbirth educator, and health coach. And she's been in practice for at least 20 years and has become internationally acclaimed for her expertise on educating and preparing expecting parents on the role of the pelvic floor during birthing and how best to prepare ahead of time. And she also co-authored the book, The Pelvic Floor, Everything You Need to Know Sooner, which is an international bestseller. And Chantal's going to be running a course for us starting on the 14th of November around holding safe space and providing optimal support for mums during pregnancy and birth. And she's going to be talking about her work now with me. So welcome, Chantal. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. It's a real honor and pleasure to be with you here, John and Andrea, and thank you everyone for joining us.
That's great. Cool. So you're going to be talking about safety, and I know you've worked quite extensively with people like Deb Dana and Stephen Porges around the polyvagal theory and adapting that for what you do. That's right, isn't it?
Yes. So I've been adapting their work or bringing it into the birth room. The moment I met Steve and heard his talking, I felt it was like the missing link. I had already been practicing for many years as a doula. And when I started applying these principles, it was like the magic that just really shifted the experiences for my clients, and being able to look through the polyvagal lens when working with my clients has help them have much more safer, positive birth experiences.
Yeah. It's so impactful, that work, isn't it? I mean, it has so many ramifications for all aspects of life, really, particularly. So a sense of safety is for pregnant and birthing women lies at the heart of what you teach. Could you just briefly explain what feeling safe and creating a safe space means to you, and why do you think it's so important?
Yeah. So, first of all, the word feeling safe is really where the emphasis is, because safety isn't just the removal of threat or danger. It's more the way that someone feels. And one of the most common question that I get as a doula, for over 21 years and a coach, is people ask me, like, how do I get this baby out of me? And while I want to meet my clients where they're at and listen to their stories and validate some of the fears, some of the biggest fears are the fear of pain and the fear of tearing, actually, in second stage of labor. And while I want to meet them there and listen to those stories, I want to reframe that question, that it's not so much about how do we get the baby out, but how do we let the baby out? Because birth is a process of welcoming, not necessarily, I think when we think about getting the baby out as a medical practice of mechanical extraction. So when we shift that, when I reframe the question, and also want to remind my clients that when they talk about the baby, it's not that the baby is a result of the pregnancy or the baby is the result of the birth. The baby is part of the process. And so birthing people really need to feel safe, a felt sense in the body, safe and supported and connected to be able to let go and let their baby out. And when they can let go to let the baby out, it's a much more easeful functional labor and more easeful adjustment postpartum. So feeling safe, I think, starts at the beginning, and the feeling connected, because we come into this world wired to connect. We come into this world and ideally into the arms of a regulated adult mammal, if you will. Now, we don't always get that experience, but we come in hoping for that. And then our search is looking for that feeling of safety. So I think it's so weaved into pregnancy and birth and postpartum. I feel it starts there.
And I mean, I've, since I first heard about the polyvagal theory, it's sort of impacted my work as a craniosacral and that obviously working with mums, it's so important. But why do you think it's so important for therapists or anyone who's working with mums and babies to understand the whole autonomic nervous system and the polyvagal theory, would you say?
I think because we can have biases towards the way people behave or that the way that they can act or why people are doing things a certain way. And when we look through the lens of 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 understanding the nervous system, one in ourselves, because I think we really have to understand it in ourselves, and then in another person, I can see the miscommunications, or I did see the miscommunications happen so much in the birth room. Now, the birth room is like an incredible environment to work with polyvagal principles or to work with the nervous system, because you're working with many different nervous systems. And so many times, and birth is a very mobilized experience. Yes, we want to bring ventral to it, but we mobilize to give birth. So people are kind of pushing the threshold in their nervous system, and sometimes it can be too much, right? And they can be seen as difficult or demanding, and then say the nurse or the doctor may pick that up and be judgmental of it, and they don't understand that this person is in a huge experience that might be at the end of their tether, and how can we rather offer cues of ventral vagal, of safety, give them those ventral cues so that they can be able to kind of come down a little bit and add ventral to, rather than get in. I just feel like the miscommunications that happen so often in these situations, in other areas as well, but it's very amped up in a birth room, especially in a hospital system, but even in home births as well. We can, and when we are in overwhelm or an hypervigilant state, we can misread cues, and these miscommunications happen. So when I think it also brings a lot of compassion when I look at people as nervous systems, and then I can advocate, or I can offer that, grounded and anchored in ventral to the different people in the room, so that we can come together as a team. It's really interesting. I find it fascinating.
Yeah, and I suppose in that situation, the perhaps some women might not have felt such a strong autonomic response, because it's very much an autonomic response, isn't it? Giving birth, it's like
Absolutely.
and completely takes you over. I know it's easy for me to say this as a man, but I've seen it many times.
Well, it can, and we're all different. And so understanding the nervous system, while we can never assume where someone else is in their nervous system, we can inquire, we can be curious. And that's why I think for the listeners here is that if you're working with, pregnant moms and their families prenatally, there's a lot that you can do ahead of time to help them understand their nervous system. Where do they go in kind of stressful situations? I think bringing awareness is the first place to be able to understand. So when I work with my clients, we're exploring this ahead of time, and I have some clues. I'll know I can step into any room and help someone where they're at, because I'm being mindful of where their nervous system may be, but helping them connect the dots, and then being able to help them in a kind of stressful situation, which is often pregnancy, which is often birth, which is often postpartum and parenting and beyond, or not. And then in postpartum, one can then reflect and look back and kind of ask, well, where was your nervous system at different stages in the
Yeah.
birth experience, and what did you notice, and what helped, what didn't help? And I think that helps the whole process as well.
Yeah. And I know you, because obviously you've worked with lots and lots of pregnant women. Could you give any examples of how this kind of understanding has helped in that?
Yeah. So let me just go back for a second and explain, like, when it comes to feeling safe, well, there's three essentials really to feeling safe. So context, and choice, and connection. So I'm really thinking about these three essentials at all times, like in this moment, or I'm providing context. I don't wait for my clients to ask me. I'm always providing context, like what can they expect, say, at that birth location at this time. Like setting the expectation, I think, is really important in the prenatal prep, for example. But providing context and providing choice, right? The ability for someone to say no or to stop, it is really important in preventing a traumatic experience, and the connection. So, and everybody needs to feel safe for a positive birth experience. Everybody in the room. So if you can imagine everyone in the room. So I had a client, and I'm going to talk about a birth story, but later in the course, we can talk about prenatal and postnatal. I had a client who now it was time to push. And going back to really just dialing back, understanding that, considering the baby's role in birth, that the baby has to go through its own time sequence physiological reflexes in order to birth itself. So having that understanding of what the physiology of the baby and the physiology of the mother. So as my client started to push, I noticed that her OB, her obstetrician, was getting really uncomfortable. They was looking at the heart monitor and looking at my client and looking at the heart monitor. And after she pushed one time, she said to my client, this baby isn't, tolerating, isn't really liking these, isn't really liking this. She said, I know that you don't want an episiotomy, but if this baby is not born in the next few pushes, I'm going to have to cut you. I'm really sorry, but this baby really needs to be born now. And my client threw me a very distressed look. And I knew that my client did not want an episiotomy. We had been working together for many weeks leading up to the birth preparedness pelvic floor. So I quickly said to her OB, I said, may I have the next couple of pushes with my client? And the OB was like, yes, of course. How can I help? But, we really have to hurry up. So I said to my client, can you turn onto your side? She had been pushing on her back. I said, can you turn onto your side? Let's see if we can give this baby a break. And she was like, I can't move. So I said, may we help you? And she said yes. So I asked her. So her OB and myself actually kind of shimmied her up and over onto her side, which allowed to free the mom's sacrum and tailbone, which I was hoping it would give some space for the baby to move. And then I said to her, may I pick this right leg up and over as you come more towards your tummy, to see if I could lift this right sit bone and give the baby a little bit more space, which it did. On the next contraction, her baby rotated. It was so low down, you could see the top of the head spiraling. On the next contraction, that baby rotated some more. And on the next contraction, her baby crowned and birthed with an intact perineum. Not a scratch. My client was so relieved. She was so happy. The OB was smiling. She was like, great call. And everybody was happy. And it was a positive birth experience.
Beautiful.
So I'll just want to kind of like point out what happened. So to give you context about how, if the doula or if the labor support person is anchored in their ventral vagal energy, they can make quick creative decisions, right? I noticed that the OB was getting uncomfortable. So she was concerned about the baby's health. Absolutely. We want a healthy mom. We want a healthy baby. So I asked her, may I have the next couple of pushes with my client? I didn't say, can I have an hour? I just asked her, I asked her questions, I gave her choice, and I gave her context. And I gave her regulating connection, co-regulation. She was like, yes, of course, but we don't have much time. So I asked my client, can we, gave her choice. So everybody in the room has to feel safe. Does that make sense to
Absolutely.
the listeners? Yeah, to you and the listeners. Because I think sometimes people think like it's us and them. We have to understand everybody's nervous system for us to work well together as a team.
Yeah. Thank you. So I know the backbone of your work is around the polyvagal theory, and this is a massive question. I do apologize for it, but can you just give a very, very brief overview of the polyvagal in reference to what you're talking about in the course?
Okay, so really, really basic, and we'll go
Yeah.
deeper, of course, into the course. But before Dr. Stephen Porges came up with his theory, the nervous system was like understood as like sympathetic, fight, flight, or freeze. And he introduced this kind of new idea of the ventral vagal, the safe and social, the newer system that came on evolutionary, much newer, and that how we move. If we think about like a nervous system ladder, we are moving through the we're moving through the parasympathetic, the sympathetic, the dorsal, parasympathetic throughout the day. And if we can become aware of our nervous system, we can titrate certain activities to be able to bring us more into ventral. So he kind of gave us the science, if you will, behind our nervous system so that we can understand it and then be able to work with our clients, work with ourselves, to be able to heal some of, because our nervous system is pretty much designed the same way, but it gets retuned and shaped during our life experiences. So if we've had, say, early adversity or some traumatic events in our lives, or the way Dr. Porges says we're like a traumatized nation, like we are all traumatized in some way. So our nervous systems are shaped from our early experiences, and then we are often moving into reactionary states. So understanding that, to be able to heal, but to be able to kind of be more present in the world, if we can understand that where we're coming from at certain times in the day or in certain situations.
Thank you. One thing I've noticed a lot in my clinical practice is that obviously in this kind of situation, a lot of women will have been through quite a lot of invasive medical, exams and all kinds of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And in that situation, mostly there isn't a lot of choice given. And so it ends up women saying, something is okay to do something when perhaps their body is definitely kind of saying no. So I'm just wondering, how do you pick that up? How do you work with that when a woman might say it's fine to touch, or because obviously we're mostly manual therapists, to touch, when actually their body is saying something different, something like no?
Yeah, absolutely. So as a doula, I have a license to touch, and then as a coach, I don't. So depending on what role I'm in. So for those that are listening, if you do have license to touch, or you work in kind of like more therapeutics or talk kind of therapy, I the way to, so yes, sometimes, awful things, yes, happen, or hard things happen. Dr. Porges describes trauma as a chronic disruption of connection in that moment, right? So a disruption. And so when we work with our clients, I will ask them, do they have a tendency to push through? What is their relationship to touch, for example? Have they been physically or sexually abused? If it's related to what happened at the birth, yes. What does touch feel like to you? And then when I work with them with touch, I want them to have the ability, the choice to say no. So the idea is to be able to work together with them to move through those stuck feelings, right? Through. And so we want to give them context. So I might say to them, we want to discover, together, what feels okay to you. And when they're ready for me to touch them, for example, if I was doing some type of massage work, or if I was even touching them to adjust them or something like that, I would ask them, first of all, I would give them context. I would tell them, okay, this is what we're going to do together. And here's what we're going to do. I'll lay out the steps. And I want you to tell me when to stop, and I will adjust. I want to give them that voice. Now, and to go really slow. Now, sometimes if someone pushes through, right? So we see this in our clients. For example, I look for the cues. If they're very, very still, like very still, that might be a clue. And I will check in with them. What's happening for you? Is this okay? So I think to really listen and pay attention and look at the nervous system, what's happening in the nervous system. And we want to work together with them and be with them as they move through this process. We are going to dive much deeper into this. In our second class, we talk a lot about touch, and I really want to go deep. And I would love people to bring, their difficult client cases, experiences that they might have had with clients. There'll be lots of time for Q&A, as well as exploring different things together. So it's kind of a lot to kind of address right now, but I think this is a very important question, and I hope I answered it just a little bit, kind of like the process of how I'm working with my clients.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, so the course is in 3 parts, isn't it? So do you mind just giving a quick run through about what you're covering in each
yeah
book? Okay.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm gonna grab what I wrote down. So we're going to go a little bit more into what the polyvagal theory is, to kind of draw out the different principles and to really understand our own nervous system. So I think when as providers, we want to understand our nervous systems to be able to help our clients. And we'll go deeper into the essentials of safety. And we'll talk about it through the, pregnancy and birth and in postnatal. And then Dr. Porges, this is also really important when you asked about his polyvagal theory. He also gave us this understanding. He coined this term neuroception, that we are constantly scanning the environment to see how we feel inside. Is it safe? Or is there threat? Is there risk? And then looking out in the world, like, is it feeling safe or is it risky? And then between, say, us. And we're doing this all the time. So to understand what's happening for us and also with our clients, and hopefully that all of you that are watching, that are feeling a sense of safety, just like between us here in the camera, like I do with you, John, like as well. So it makes it easier to have this conversation. So we're going to understand that a lot more, because our nervous system state is what shapes our stories. And that's really important to know when we're working with people who've had difficult situations or traumatic situations, and also as we're preparing them for the birth and experience and what to expect postpartum. So we'll go over that and co-regulation, connection co-regulation, which is also a huge part of Dr. Stephen Porges' work of the polyvagal theory. And then in our second one, we'll talk about breath, because that is the portal to really calming our nervous system. And it is the portal for working through the contractions for birth. So I'm going to be applying this towards pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. So we're going to be looking through that lens. We'll go through movements that I like to introduce to my clients prenatally that they can use during the birth experience, and then and different things for postpartum. And then we'll go through touch. We might do some touch maps, which I'm really excited about doing ahead of time. So we'll explore that a lot deeper in ourselves. And then these are actually things that you could try with your clients. And then our third class, we're going to look at postpartum. We'll look at disappointing births, what happened, and how we can work with our clients to reframe that or to move through that, and to address that, process that. We'll talk about ruptures and repairs, because they do happen when there's a rupture in connection between your client and their provider, between your client and you, between your client and their spouse. So, it happens a lot, but how do it's not so much the rupture, but how we can come back into connection. And then, wrapping your clients up in their resources. We'll talk about, how I work with my client, which I think are important to set up, for setting up their care team for positive pregnancy, birth, and postpartum experience. There will be time for Q&A with all the sessions, and I'm hoping that you'll bring some of your difficult client cases, that you'll have questions, so there will be room for that. Yeah, and then I think whatever comes up here, the life of the group often takes it in a certain direction as well. So there will be room for, how much we spend in different areas. I have an idea of what I want to cover, and then your questions and your participation is kind of really brings the magic into the sessions.
Brilliant. That sounds wonderful. Great. So your course is on Tuesdays, starting on the 14th of November, and then the 21st and the 28th at 7 p.m. UK time. So if you're in the States, just check on the time change.
Yes, there's a time change next week.
Over the next couple of weeks, yes. Rachel just commenting though about your story that you just said there. Although depressing, a doctor doesn't understand physiological birth, and encouraging a mother off her back should be the first thought, not their last. That's very true, I think.
Yeah.
For the baby to be in distress.
Yeah. That's why I think, this is what we have, and we want to work with that and understanding and teaching our clients ahead of time, really understanding the physiological experience for both the baby and the mom, I think is really helpful. I feel like doctors are learning though. I really feel like they are, because I work with them a lot, and I it's definitely, I see the shift over the years. I've been practicing for 21 years, and I absolutely see some of the ones that were very, very rigid are much, Chantal, okay, what position do you suggest? Or they have learned, different positions as well. So I think slowly we're making change.
Wonderful. Great. Thank you so much, Chantal. That was really wonderful. So I'm really looking forward to your course. So you can get details at ourbirthjourney.com. Just look up on upcoming events or under courses, and you can see how to sign up there. So thank you, everybody. And thank you, especially Chantal. Great. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Should I stay on a couple of minutes and just, I'll see you next week.
Yeah, see you next week, Lottie.
Yeah.